Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching third part of What If Naruto Was Forgotten Son of Minato. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Konoha, Hokage's office, Kushina's point of view, 1 month before Chunin exams. Kushina was running through Konoha's streets, her mind racing. The clouds, which were dark gray with thunder in the distance, seemed to reflect her mood. How could she have forgotten about her own child? She wasn't hysterical enough to ignore the sensation of genjutsu lifting. If the genjutsu had anything to do with why she had forgotten her Sochi, he or she would be burned. She dashed into the Hokage building and slammed Minato's door open. Minato looked up, surprised by his wife's sudden appearance. Kushina? What is going on? When he saw her teary eyes, his words faded. Kushina cried out to Minato, "Our son Minato. We forgot about our son. I was looking through a photo album when I noticed a picture of him." Minato felt something shatter in his mind, and memories of Naruto flooded his mind. He sorted through a few of them, feeling sick and placing his hand over his brow. How could I not remember my son? He wondered. That felt like a genjutsu was ripped from my mind. We need to find him, Minato. Who knows where he could have gone? Kushina wiped away her tears. He could end up on the streets. Minato rubbed his brow, rationalizing the situation. He was devastated by this revelation. He understood the anguish of growing up without parents because he was an orphan himself. But to have parents who appear to have abandoned you, even if it's unintentionally, he would harbor resentment toward his former parents and wish to exact revenge. We can't just announce to the entire village that our son is missing, he said to Kushina. With the Chunin exams approaching, a scandal involving a Hokage abandoning their child could devastate the village in front of all the clients. Kushina appeared irritated. Then what do we do? Do nothing while my Sochi is somewhere out there? Minato shakes his head. I never said anything like that. I'll gather every Anbu member and Jonin in the village and instruct them to look for Naruto in a quiet manner. I will also send notes to the hospital requesting that all non-clan genin blood be tested to see if any of them match our DNA. I don't care if our son hates us for our neglect, even if it was under the force of a genjutsu, Kushina said, wiping tears from her eyes as she looked fiercely at Minato. It's probably too late for me to be his mother, but I'll be damned if I don't make sure he's safe and offer him our home again. Minato nodded, a sorrowful expression on his face. She left the Hokage's tower with a determined expression on her face. She planned to search the orphanage's records first, then the academy records, to see if she could find anything on Naruto. Konoha Minato's office. Minato's point of view. He buried his face in his hands as soon as Kushina left. What could have caused this? He reflected on all the times in his life when genjutsu had caused him to ignore his son. The only person he could think of who could cast genjutsu on him is the masked man from that night. He took out all of the genin files from the previous year. He discards the alibis sheets of the clan heirs and children. He was soon down to one candidate, who could be Naruto. Menma, the black-haired and blue-eyed genin, was depicted in the folder. He ignored the difference in hair color and the absence of a pupil. Both could be the result of hair coloring and overtraining. His pupilless blue eyes matched his own in color. He opened the folder containing the boy's history and discovered that he applied for orphan status at the age of 6, claiming that he had no knowledge of his ancestors. The boy applied to the academy the next day at the age of 8 and was rarely seen around the village until he was accepted. He got to his feet because he needed to find Menma. Uzumaki Estate. Konoha, Shio's point of view, immediately after the wave mission. Shio and the rest of Team 7 had just returned from their C rank to a rank transformation in the Land of Waves. It had been a long mission, and she was eager to return home. Kakashi-sensei had told them that they would report their mission the next day and that they could take the rest of the day off. She entered the estate and the house, calling out, "I'm home." She looked around. This is unusual. Kushina is usually at home by this time. Did Ka-san go out? When she entered the living room, she noticed a photo album open on the floor. When she picked up the book and saw the picture of Naruto, she felt a breaking sensation in her head, and memories of her older brother flashed through her mind. In shock, she exclaimed and dropped the book. Where had her Oni-san gone? She clasped her hands in prayer and opened her eyes wider. She had been practicing senjutsu with the toads for over a month and had mastered the fundamentals. She made a shadow clone and asked it to meditate with her. Soon, a red pigment encircled her eyes, which snapped open to reveal toad-like pupils. She stood up, left the clone meditating, and went to where she could feel the presence of her brother's chakra. She walked into one of their spare bedrooms, which they rarely used, and saw a sparse room. There was a single bed, a bookshelf, and a desk piled high with books and notes. She went to where she felt the chakra and discovered a sealing tag on the desk. It was a beginner's seal that acted as a battery for people learning fuinjutsu. She remembered her brother's chakra signature and sat in a lotus position to expand her senses. She had never been able to sense that far before, but she ignored the issue and continued to expand her sensing range until she covered the entire village and the training grounds beyond. As she felt her brother's chakra signature at Training Ground 26, she opened her eyes and dashed out the window. Training Ground 26 Konoha, Menma's point of view. Training Ground 26 is a one-of-a-kind training facility in Konoha. Instead of a forested terrain, the training grounds consist of one large lake surrounded by several large cliffs. On the lake, there were numerous small islands and waterfalls cascading down the cliff faces. This is an excellent training ground for underwater fighting, water ninjutsu, and water walking. Menma was currently working on the final step of water mastery training, reversing the flow of a waterfall. He was eager to finish this exercise before the Chunin exams. He was about to resume his training when he became aware of a presence behind him. He was taken aback when he noticed Shio standing there with an unreadable expression on his face. He tried to keep his hatred for the girl at bay, but it always bubbled to the surface whenever she was near. He cast a light glance. "Whatever you want, I don't want you interfering with my training." Shio frowned and said, "Naruto Oni-san." When he heard his former sister say that name, he froze. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said, his eyes narrowing in rage. "I am not your younger brother. I know your chakra signature. I don't know why I forgot you for so long, but I remember now," Shio said, her hands balled into fists. "I am certain that you are Naruto, my brother. Please return home so that we can be a family again." Menma frowned slightly. "Even if I were your brother, I am no longer. Your pitiful parents never had time for the younger sibling, so why should I consider returning to that home?" As the web marking under his eye seemed to expand a little further down his cheek, he felt his rage intensify. Shio appeared to become enraged and yelled, "I don't know why they would forget about you, but I know my parents. They would never abandon any of their children. The Uzumakis never abandon their children." Naruto scowled at Shio and yelled back, "You may believe in your parents, but I provided them with numerous opportunities to notice me. I yelled, begged, and prayed for them to notice me, but they always pushed me away to focus on you." As the toxicity of his blood increased in response to his anger, he felt his hatred grow. Shio appeared to steel herself, saying, "If you refuse to come home." She popped open her nodashi. The sword stood as tall as she did, with a plain black grip and an ornate steel guard. She crouched into her stance, blade pointed behind her, and sprinted forward, shouting, "Then I will force you." Shio manipulated the wind around her blade and twisted in a graceful arc before swinging her sword, sending a powerful slash of wind at Menma while shouting, "Majestic slash of the heavenly breeze." He scowled slightly before drawing his chakra scalpel and slicing through the wind slash, splitting the strike into two pieces that slammed into the cliff behind him, deeply scaring it. He knew that fighting Shio in close combat would be suicide. Her wind manipulation and sword skills were almost unrivaled in the village. His arrows would be useless against her wind, but he did have one advantage. They were floating on water. He sped through some hand seals before exclaiming, "Acid-style, water spider bombs." Out of the water bubbled medium-sized spiders with a red dot in the center. They all dashed at Shio at a medium pace. Shio quickly spun around in a pirouette, causing a cyclone of wind and water to form around her as the water spiders jumped at her, exploding violently when they came into contact with the wind and water wall. Another blade of wind cut through the water wall, severing it in half. He performed 4 hand seals before exclaiming, "Water-style, hardened water wall." As a hardened wall of water blocked the wind blade, the lake surged beneath them. He channeled chakra through his hands once more and performed 3 more hand seals. Acid-style. No jutsu for a giant spider bomb. A huge spider with a glowing red core emerged from the large wall of water, pounced on Shio, and exploded on her. He remained on guard, doubting that spider would have killed her. He widened his eyes at the sight before him as he heard a slight whirling of wind emerge from the spray of water from the bomb. Shio was surrounded by 4 large fan-like blades that spun around her, forming a shield. "So this is the famed chakra manipulation of the Namikaze Uzumaki family," he examined the blades. Many people wondered what Minato might be able to do with Kushina's ability to harden her chakra outside of her body. "I suppose this is the end result." Shio nodded. "Yes, this is my true sword style, the 5 blades dance." "Naruto, please surrender. You will not be able to defeat me." He dilated his pupils. Normally, he knew he had no chance against her in melee combat. He wrapped his chakra scalpels around his hands, but instead of medical chakra, he used pure acid release chakra, and acid began to drip off his hands as they turned black. He began to use senjutsu and spread a chakra web around his body to increase his sensory abilities. His eyes took on Arachne's spider web insignia, and the whites of his eyes turned black. "I will not surrender to you. I dedicated my life to defeating you, and I will prove myself to be stronger than you," he said, staring at Shio with his new eyes. With those words, he performed several hand seals with his poisoned palms and exclaimed, "Acid release. Dokukiri no jutsu." A purple mist soon blanketed the majority of the battlefield. Shio stood inside the mist, her chakra blades circling her and forming a ball of pure air around her to keep the poison from affecting her. Menma emerged from the mist, his chakra scalpels poised to sever her. However, before he could reach her, one of the chakra blades floating around stabbed him in the shoulder. As he dissolved into acid, Menma widened his eyes and smirked. Shio scowled. Those clones were extremely dangerous. If she killed one of them near her body, they would cover her in acid. She performed some hand seals before inhaling some air, wind-style, great breakthrough. And a huge gust of air was released from her mouth, blowing away the poisoned mist. When the mist cleared, she was surrounded by 10 Narutos. She looked around, trying to figure out which one was real. She scowled slightly, knowing that one wrong move would leave her covered in acid. She spun around and unleashed a circular slash around her, severing all of the clones and raising a wall of wind around herself to keep the acid explosions from reaching her. She stood tense for a few seconds before feeling glowing hands clamp around her ankles, screamed as her tendons were severed, and Menma emerged from the water behind her, chakra scalpels glowing around his hands. "End of the line," he sneered at her. When she went through some hand seals and bit her thumb, summoning no jutsu. He jumped away just in time for a massive red toad to appear in a puff of smoke. Shio stood up, panting slightly from the summoning cost of Gamabunta and feeling the Kyuubi's chakra heal her cut tendons. Gamabunta frowned as he looked up at Shio. "Why did you summon me here, Gaki?" Shio said to the massive frog beneath her, "I'm fighting my lost brother. We need to knock him out and return him home so Dad and Mom can explain what's going on. And don't you think summoning me is a bit over?" Gamabunta would have continued, but a shout of "summoning no jutsu" interrupted him, and a spider almost as large as Gamabunta appeared in a large burst of smoke. Menma stood on the beast's head and said calmly, "Aragog, let us fight together against this toad." He felt the spider beneath him shift slightly, and it said softly, "Yes, summoner, this toad will feed our clan for a long time." Shio gaped at the sight of the spider, wondering how his brother obtained the spider's summoning contract. Gamabunta shifted slightly beneath her as he gripped his massive tanto. "I'd heard rumors of a new spider summoner but didn't believe them, but I've always liked fried spider legs." The two titans were soon fighting, reshaping the training ground as their attacks shattered the cliffsides around them. Their summoners assist with elemental attacks and warn their summons of dangers. Aragog appeared to rely on entangling Gamabunta in webs while the toad slicing through the webs and dodging pincer attacks. The two animals were on their last legs after a few minutes of intense combat. "Ha ha ha, I am only good for about one more attack, Gaki. Let's make it count," Gamabunta said, looking up at Shio. Shio nodded as he looked down at Gamabunta. Shio used the fireball jutsu to light the oil on fire, creating a massive gout of flames at the spider as Gamabunta's mouth swelled with oil and he spat it out in torrents at Aragog. Menma went through hand signs and combined the web with his water chakra to create a massive wall of water that blocked the large sea of flames in front of him. Menma and Shio were panting as the steam cleared from the amount of flames hitting the cold water, looking at each other from opposite sides of two cliff faces. Shio lifted her head, and her shadow clone poofed into smoke inside her room at the estate. Shio's nature chakra surged, and she entered Sage Mode. She remembered a warning from Pa about Sage Mode as she entered it. Flashback. Shio and Pa Toad sat across from each other, Shio in Sage Mode while Pa observed. She began to lose control of her energy after a few minutes of Sage Mode before feeling a harsh smack of a stick on her head. Shio made Pa proud. "Well, Shio-chan, it appears that you can stay in Sage Mode for about 5 minutes before losing control of the energy. If you were forced to use Senjutsu before finishing your training, only stay in the mode for 5 minutes. Flashback concludes. Menma frowned as the nature chakra entered Shio. After blocking Gamabunta's flame toad bullet, he had almost no chakra left. He was planning his next move when he remembered something Arachne had told him. Flashback. Menma was practicing acid release when Arachne appeared in front of him. "Naruto, please come here." Naruto approached Arachne with a curious expression on his face. "I wanted to speak to you about learning partial spider transformation," she said, her usual sleepy expression on her face. "It usually takes about a year and a half to master this form. However, there is another application for it." Naruto appeared to be interested. "How can I use the transformation without first learning how to use it, sensei?" Arachne spoke solemnly. "If you summoned me in battle, we could merge, and I could force the transformation for a short period of time, no more than 5 minutes in battle." Naruto appeared thoughtful. "Thank you for reminding me of that, sensei." Flashback concludes. Menma performed some hand seals. Summoning Jutsu. Arachne. Arachne appeared in a puff of smoke. She smiled and nodded, knowing exactly what they wanted. She kissed him on the lips and became one with him. Soon, Naruto's power exploded as the spider web pattern in his eyes seemed to glow and expand across his eyes. 4 pincer-like claws exploded from his back, and fangs grew from his mouth. As he finished merging, he noticed his muscles becoming denser, the form as a male version of Elise from LOL. Naruto and Shio exchanged a few glances before charging at each other, slamming their fists against each other, and a shockwave blew the water away around them as they engaged in a fierce taijutsu battle. Shio had the advantage of her frog kata and increased physical ability, whereas Naruto had 4 extra appendages and his own increased strength to fight with. They jumped around the battlefield, neither side yielding as they fought fiercely against one another. They began to sense each other's motivation for fighting as they fought. Shio's regret and determination to rid him of his hatred were palpable to Naruto. Shio could sense Naruto's rage and sadness at being abandoned, as well as his determination to prove himself stronger than her. After about 5 minutes, they were both panting heavily, the extra features of senjutsu gone as they stared at each other. Shio panted as she spoke, "I only have enough chakra for one more jutsu, and I'm sure you have the same, so let's call it a day." As she lifted her hand, a green Rasengan formed in it, spiraling fiercely as rain and thunder began to fall around them. "Rasengan!" she yelled, leaping forward. Naruto stretched both arms out, one gripping the other as a sphere of extremely toxic venom formed in his hands, 6 legs and a dark red core, Arachne's soul. "Queen Venom Bomb!" he yelled as he ran up to Shio. The attacks collided in a massive explosion of energy, with the toxic bomb colliding with the Rasengan's maelstrom. The 2 attacks battled it out for supremacy. However, both techniques soon exploded, resulting in a massive implosion of the wind-soaked chakra colliding with the highly toxic acid. When the explosion died down, Naruto and Shio were both knocked unconscious on some fallen rubble next to each other. The rain continued to fall on their forms as the titanic battle came to an end. Soon after, Minato jumped down near them, sadly staring at their 2 forms. He was deeply saddened that they were forced to fight in such a titanic battle. They should be living happily together rather than attempting to kill each other. As he felt like a failure, tears streamed down his cheeks. What was the point of being the world's strongest ninja if he couldn't even protect his family? In pain, he looked up at the rain before summoning a shadow clone to transport Naruto and Shio to the hospital. From Naruto's mindscape. When Naruto opened his eyes, he found himself on a large pond surrounded by forest. Large torii surrounded the pond. When he looked around, he noticed a small fox with 2 tails sitting in front of him. "Let us talk, Naruto Uzumaki," the fox said, looking at him with understanding and pity. Naruto's mindscape. Unknown location. Naruto's point of view. Naruto looked around the landscape before returning his attention to the 2-tailed kitsune. "Who are you, and where are you?" "I am the former 9-tailed fox, the great Kyuubi no Kitsune, and we are in your mindscape," the kitsune said, amused. "Why are you here when you should be sealed within my sister?" he wondered. The Kyuubi laughed. "Yes, if I hadn't inserted a tiny portion of my chakra into you before I was sealed, I should be sealed within your sister. As you grew, so did your yokai chakra, allowing it to hold my consciousness." Naruto cast a suspicious look at the Kyuubi. "Why would you flee Shio's seal only to seal yourself into me? You could easily escape from my body if you didn't have a seal holding you back." The fox gave a nod. "Yes, I could leave your body at any time, but I have no desire to do so. I sacrificed most of my chakra in order to move to your body, so I am much weaker than before. Your body provided me with both anonymity from my enemies and a safe haven to regain my former strength." Naruto nodded, comprehending the logic. "And when you regain your strength, will you attack Konoha again?" The Kyuubi shrugged his shoulders. "No, I'm not interested in Konoha or its inhabitants. Madara Uchiha forced me to attack Konoha." He dilated his pupils. "Madara Uchiha died in the battle against the first Hokage years ago." The Kyuubi's eyes glowed with rage. "That is a fabrication. Madara Uchiha is still alive, and he has forced me to attack Konoha. He also forced your parents to abandon you using his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan eyes. Naruto's eyes widened as he remembered something Anko had told him. Flashback. Anko gave Menma a serious look. No parent forgets or neglects their children on their own. Even if they had been more focused on their sister, they would never have forgotten about you. It's not in our nature. Flashback concludes. He had ignored her advice at the time, too preoccupied with his desire for vengeance to give it much thought. But it made sense. However, he remembered from his Shinto studies that kitsunes were master manipulators. He took a look at the Kyuubi. How do I know you're not simply twisting the truth to your advantage? I know kitsunes are masters of deception and manipulation, so how do I know you didn't cast the genjutsu on my parents? He nearly missed it, but the Kyuubi's eyes flashed with guilt before returning to their normal calm expression. Isn't it true that you were the one who performed the genjutsu on my parents when you injected me with your yokai? You'd later tell me it was Madara Uchiha who incited my hatred for him. Kyuubi sighed deeply. Ninjin, you are smarter than I gave you credit for. Yes, I used deception to make your parents forget about you. Naruto pulled out a chakra scalpel and attempted to cut the Kyuubi, but he was stopped by 9 balls of ethereal flame. Do not tempt me, Ninjin. Despite only having a fraction of my former power, I am more than enough to deal with you easily, the Kyuubi said calmly. Naruto scowled at the reason for his hatred abandonment. Why would you do it? Why would you make my parents abandon me? For your own sick entertainment? Get back to me. For a few seconds, the Kyuubi remained silent before sighing heavily. At the very least, the boy in front of him deserved the truth. Very well, Ninjin, but be aware of this. We must go back to the beginning to understand why I am manipulating your life. The world around them shifted until Naruto saw 2 giants fighting each other, one male and one female. The male had an aged face and long white hair, and he wore simple monk's robes adorned with prayer beads. The woman was stunning, with dark black hair and a stunning white kimono. Their battle was on a godly scale, reshaping the earth, destroying continents, and annihilating anything caught in the crossfire. The Kyuubi appeared next to him and explained everything. Izanagi fought his wife, Izanami, in the early stages of our world. The debate was whether or not to share their abilities with the rest of the world's humans. Izanagi desired to share his power with humans in order to spread peace, whereas Izanami desired to rule over all humans with an iron fist and keep them weak and helpless. The battle shaped the world as we know it today. Izanagi triumphed over his former wife at the end of the battle. The man stabbed a sword through the woman's heart in the scene. As she collapsed, she looked up at her husband and issued a prophecy: "My husband and I will return to this world in some form or another one day. You've only pushed my plans back." Before speaking, Izanagi looked at his wife with sadness. "My beloved, you shall never walk among the living again. I exile you to Yami for the rest of eternity. You will be the seal that guards this world against the realms beyond." Izanagi lifted a monk's staff, and Izanami was engulfed in a black void. Kyuubi continued to explain. Izanagi had no idea at the time that Izanami had one last trump card. The fruit of the Shinju tree. The Shinju is a sentient tree that grows deep within Yami. Anyone who consumes the fruit of a Shinju will be cursed, but will gain tremendous power. Before she was sealed away, Izanami injected a small portion of her power into the seed and buried it. The scene changed again to show numerous wars and bloodshed until a great tree emerged from the blood of the fallen warriors and grew to a massive height, bearing a fruit that resembled a peach at the very top. The Kyuubi regarded the scene with sadness before proceeding. The Shinju tree eventually grew from the blood of fallen warriors, producing tainted fruit. It remained there for many years until a princess, tired of war and bloodshed, ate the fruit and gained the power to end the world's wars. A black-haired girl was seen climbing to the top of the Shinju before devouring the fruit. She collapsed to the ground in agony after eating it. Her hair and eyes whitened. She developed a third eye and horns, giving birth to the rabbit goddess Kaguya. She ruled the world fairly for a time using the Shinju's power. However, Izanami's energies eventually began to twist Kaguya. Kaguya quickly became a tyrant and demon, ruling the world with a heavy fist. She began to use the Shinju, with Izanami whispering in her ear, to drain the life force of her subjects, increasing her own power. Izanagi, finally intervening to stop Kaguya, bestowed 2 gifts on her sons, the older brother receiving the Rinnegan. He gave the Byakugan and the ability to manipulate his body to his younger brother. When Kaguya discovered this, she merged with the Shinju to form the terrifying Jubi. A monstrous beast with 10 tails battled 2 men in the scene. The battle lasted several days until Hagoromo, the older brother, sealed the Jubi's chakra within himself while his brother sealed the Jubi's body in the moon and cast it out into space. Following the battle, both brothers were regarded as mortal gods. While his brother remained unknown, Hagoromo rose to prominence as the sage of the 6 paths. Both brothers eventually married and started families. The Uchiha, Senju, Hyuga, and Kaguya clans were founded by these children. On his deathbed nearly a century later, Hagoromo gathered the 9 animal spirits he had befriended and gave each of them a piece of the Jubi's chakra, thus creating the 9 Biju. I received the majority of the chakra. With his dying breaths, he warned us not to resurrect the Shinju because it would drain all life on the planet, allowing Kaguya to escape her prison. He did, however, make his younger son, Asura, his heir. As a result, the feud between the Senju and the Uchiha lingered for centuries. After years of fighting, the heirs of the Uchiha and Senju clans, Madara and Hiroshima, agreed to form a ninja village. Years later, Madara discovered a tablet left by Hagoromo that mentioned the Jubi and its power. Corrupted by this knowledge, he began to plot his ancestors' Jinchuriki of the Jubi. As a result, he pretended to die during his battle with Hiroshima. He began making plans to gather the 9 Biju in the shadows. During the battle, I was sealed in Mito Uzumaki, which gave him the idea for Jinchuriki. It would be suicide for him to gather the 9 Biju by himself, but kidnapping their sealed containers would be child's play. He used the newly formed villages to seal the Biju inside humans and use them as weapons of war. While the nations were at war, he began to form his own organization, the Akatsuki. Now he hopes to resurrect the Jubi and become its Jinchuriki, becoming a mortal god like Hagoromo so many years ago. What he doesn't realize is that the Jubi contains Kaguya and a portion of Izanami's essence, which would recreate the Shinju and absorb him, as well as all life in the elemental nations, weakening the seal on Izanami and dooming all life on the planet. Naruto's eyes widened as he realized he had just learned the origins of the ninja world. He returned his gaze to the Kyuubi. What is your name? A typical animal spirit would be unaware of all of this. The Kyuubi laughed, and a spirit outline of a white fox with 9 tails encircled him. You are correct, young mortal. I was the god of foxes, Inari Okami, not just a fox spirit. I befriended Hagoromo, who sealed the largest piece of the Jubi into my body for safekeeping. Are you saying a god could be subjugated by Madara to do whatever he wanted? Naruto wondered. Inari grimaced. An unanticipated complication. He was able to control me because of the Jubi chakra within me. I'm sure Hagoromo was aware of this, but he believed the Sharingan could be used to stop us if we went on a rampage. It was instead used to enslave the Biju. This is why I sacrificed my chakra to enter you. I am now free of the Jubi's chakra and have been reinstated as the fox god, Inari Okami. The god bowed its head in humiliation. However, I was extremely frail. Any opponent who would have killed you would have taken me with them. So I had no choice but to give you the one gift that would have kept you safe: anonymity. You would have faced more assassination attempts and enemies as the son of Minato Namikaze than a nameless orphan. This gave me enough time to gather the strength I needed to defend myself. Naruto understood why Inari did what he did, but that didn't mean he had to like it. Are you saying you made my life hell just so I could be a pawn in God's game of life? Yes, from the moment you were born, you were chosen to be one of the 3 prophecy children to save this world from the resurrection of Izanami. The mindscape shifted back to the pond, and a door appeared behind Naruto. Inari spoke while standing in the middle of the lake. Naruto, you may despise me, but I did what was necessary. If Izanami no Okami is resurrected, the world will perish. Naruto returned the fox's gaze before turning around and walking through the door. Konoha Hospital, Minato's point of view. Minato sighed as he looked at his estranged son's unconscious figure. He had conducted a blood test on Menma and discovered that he is Naruto Uzumaki. What concerned him was the other DNA found in his blood. According to the doctors, it appears that someone or something took a chunk of Naruto's DNA and replaced it. The medic Nin who performed the blood test hypothesized that the extra DNA was the cause of his altered appearance. Shio had awoken several hours after the battle to a severe tongue lashing and grounding for his recklessness. When she described the battle, they were astounded by their former son's abilities. Minato assumed Naruto was the new spider summoner about whom the toads had heard rumors. He nearly flipped when he learned Shio had used rudimentary senjutsu against Naruto. Senjutsu is a highly dangerous skill. If you are not old enough to contain the energies, you may turn to stone. He was surprised, however, to learn that Naruto had merged with a summoned woman and had entered a form of sage mode himself. He imagined it was like when Ma or Pa would merge with Jiraiya and gather sage chakra as he fought. Shio was still sore in every single one of her muscles from the stress of her sage mode. The cost of entering sage mode too soon is that the body cannot handle the strain, resulting in ripped muscles and other injuries. She was lucky not to go over the limit because she could have been paralyzed. He perked up when he noticed Naruto moving and opening his eyes. Naruto's point of view. Naruto opened his eyes to see the hospital's white room. He looked around and noticed his ex-father sitting there. He was surprised that he no longer felt hatred for the man. He guessed that not all of his rage was directed at Madara, Inari, and the other gods. He knew Minato wasn't to blame. Who could stand up to a god's genjutsu? Especially the god of foxes, who is known for his deception. He struggled to sit up because the aftereffects of using sage mode without training were still bothering him. She forces the process of transformation, which is very taxing on the body, by fusing with Arachne. He returned his gaze to Minato and waited for the man to speak. Minato appeared to gather his thoughts before speaking. I was raised as an orphan. My parents were killed in the Second Shinobi War, and I was placed in an orphanage. It wasn't a bad childhood, but growing up without parents is a lonely experience. When I married Kushina, I vowed to give my children the best childhood I never had. We were overjoyed when you were born. I had just been promoted to Hokage and thought my life couldn't get any better. He appeared to tire and sighed heavily before continuing. Then came the Kyuubi attack, just as your sister was born. Kushina was fighting for her life in the hospital. My daughter was now a Jinchuriki for the strongest of the Biju, and the third Hokage was dead. He appeared to think about how to proceed before speaking again. Kushina and I recently felt as if a genjutsu had been lifted. We don't know who created the illusion, but it had to be extremely powerful for us to notice it. Minato was unaware of this, but his words confirmed what Inari had said in his mindscape. Naruto considered Minato's words as he gazed out the window. I swore revenge against your family ever since I was 5 and was locked out of the estate. Minato winced at his ex-words, sons, but allowed him to continue. Every day, I worked out to prove that I was better than my sister. I knew she'd be trained by at least 4 cage-level ninjas. So I practiced medical ninjutsu, poisons, and other subjects that she would not expect. But now I've discovered that my parents were under genjutsu the whole time, and it wasn't entirely their fault. He paused, unsure of how to proceed, before speaking again. I no longer harbor ill will toward your family, Minato-san. Minato appeared resigned as he realized Naruto was not finished, and he was correct. He went on, but I don't think I'll ever be a true member of your family. Years of hating your existence cannot be undone so easily. Minato sighed dejectedly. I had the same thought. However, please know that you have our family's full support if you require it. If you want to interact with the family again, you can return to the estate at any time. Kushina, on the other hand, was nearly broken upon learning that we had abandoned you, even if unintentionally. He nodded, as he had expected. Minato stood up and turned to leave the room before returning. I'm proud of the man you've become, Naruto. He walked out of the room. As the door closed, Naruto closed his eyes briefly and considered the situation. He was perplexed. Should he hate Izanami for causing all of this? Madara for carrying on with her work? Or Inari for doing the right thing by separating him from his family? He looked around the room, noticing a small spider on the window and smiling slightly. Arachne? Arachne entered the room in a puff of smoke, sitting on the chair Minato had vacated, a worried expression on her face. As she sat quietly listening, he explained the situation and what he had learned from Inari. She reached out and hugged him after he finished, while stroked his hair. It's okay to be perplexed, Naruto. However, all you can do is look ahead and decide your own fate. Even if the gods planned your life, that doesn't mean you have to conform to their wishes. You can be whoever you want to be. What the gods failed to recognize is that humanity's greatest gift is the freedom from fate. You can adapt, grow, and gain experience to confront this threat. I have faith in the summoner of the Spider Clan that you will be able to break free from the web that binds you to the gods' plan and forge your own path. She kissed him on the cheek and sat beside him, looking out the window, contemplating the situation and how to proceed. At the top of Konoha Monument, 3 days after being released from the hospital, from Naruto's point of view. Naruto stood atop the third Hokage's head, looking out over the village. He had his hood up because it was lightly raining. His entire life had drastically changed in the last few days. The fight with his sister, the revelation of Inari, and the hospital visit from his parents. He closed his eyes as he recalled his conversation with his mother. Flashback. Minato had already left when he felt another presence through his chakra webs. He sighed slightly as the door opened to reveal his former mother, Kushina Uzumaki. She didn't appear to be in good health. Her hair was messy, and her eyes were puffy and red. Before he could say anything, she rushed up to him and sobbed. He was at a loss for words. I don't know how to deal with this, he thought. Sochi, I am so sorry. We never meant to abandon you. Kushina managed to say through her tears. He awkwardly patted her on the back as she apologized for his abandonment. When I realized you were gone, I felt so horrible, she said clearly. Both Minato and I know how it is to grow up without parents, and to unknowingly bestow the same fate on our son. She seemed to lose a bit of her composure and began to cry again. Naruto's expression softened as he observed his mother. This was more proof that they did not abandon him on purpose. Nobody could pull off that kind of sadness. He sighed slightly and spoke, when I learned that you abandoned me because of a genjutsu, I didn't know what to think. After Minato explained his childhood, I doubted either of you would ever abandon me on purpose. He looked down and touched his web markings. If you hadn't forgotten me, I would never have met the Spider Clan, or Anko. I used to hate you too. It was my purpose for growing strong. I swore when I was locked out of the house to become stronger than all of you, but now my hatred for you has vanished. I doubt I'll ever think of you or Minato as my parents. Kushina began crying quietly again, but nodded in agreement. But that doesn't mean we can't be friends, Naruto said, lifting his hand. Kushina looked surprised, but laughed and shook Naruto's hand. Sure. Flashback concludes. He was still thinking when he heard footsteps behind him and looked up to see his teammate Lee. I thought you'd be here, Lee said with a slight smile. Naruto returned his gaze to Konoha, saying, I like to come here to think. You seem to be coming up here a lot, Lee said as he approached him. That just means I have a lot to think about, he snorted, smirking. I know how to answer some of your questions, Lee smiled. He followed Lee to a training ground, looking at him with interest. In the midst of battle, you will be able to relight your flames of youth. Lee spun around in the Goken stance. Naruto looked perplexed before laughing. Are you sure you want to fight me dead last? I am confident I can provide a worthy challenge, Mr. Rookie of the Year, Lee said as he charged forward at breakneck speed. He grinned even wider and rushed forward to meet Lee's punch with the numerous toxins in his blood. 1 hour later. Lee and Naruto were both exhausted as they lay on the practice field when they both looked up to see Yakumo and Anko's smiling faces. They all began to laugh and joke around, while Naruto was thinking inwardly, I can't see you guys as family because I already have a perfect one right here. Konoha Academy, Chunin Exams Day, 5 hours before the exam, Naruto's POV. Naruto, Lee, and Yakumo are making their way through the academy's hallways to the 3rd floor for the first Chunin exam test. They had arrived early in order to scout the competition and find a good unnoticed position. Many foreign genin teams from the 5 great villages and nobles arrived in Konoha for the exams over the last few days. Except for a minor altercation with Asuna and Konoha team, no incidents were reported. They had all noticed the small genjutsu on the 2nd floor, but Naruto quickly said, don't mention it, the less competition the better. Team 9 arrived at the testing room and noticed that there were not many teams there this early. Only teams from Kumo, Sand, Kiri, and Iwa were present. The Kumo crew included a blonde with generous assets, a redhead with tanned skin, and a tanned boy with white hair sucking on a lollipop. A makeup-wearing boy in a onesie, a blonde girl with a large fan on her back, and a red-haired teal-eyed boy with a large gourd on his back comprised the Suna team. A boy wearing sound dampeners with a large fish-shaped two-handed sword wrapped in bandages on his back, a flamboyant-looking boy in a large blue coat, and a tanned boy with a trident strapped to his back comprised the Kiri team. They recognized the Iwa team from their first C-rank mission. Naruto assumed that Iwa had forced them to take this exam in order to prove their strength. As more and more teams arrived, none of them spoke to one another. Naruto recognized all of the rookie genin teams from this year. Nothing noteworthy occurred until Shio's team arrived. Shio had joined forces with Sasuke Uchiha and Kiba Inazaka. Before he heard his name, he kept looking around the room. I'd like to know more about Mito Gecko, Gaara of the Desert, and Menma. He returned his gaze to the group and noticed Team 7 standing in front of someone he recognized. Ah, hey Kabuto, never thought I'd see you outside of the hospital, he said as he walked over to Kabuto. While working part-time at the hospital, Naruto met Kabuto. They frequently discussed various medical practices and theories. Oh. Hey Nari mean Menma, How do you know Kabuto? Shio exclaimed, surprised to see her brother. I know Menma-kun from working at the hospital, we usually work shifts together. Anyway, the information. He pulled out a card, Mito Gecko, daughter of two of Konoha's premier swordsmen and swordswomen, Hayate Gecko and Yaguo Uzumi. She was almost the kunoichi of the year last year but lost due to her lower marks in genjutsu and throwing skills. She has been on 5 C ranks and Naruto kept an eye on the crowd as Kabuto listed the information and noticed that the teams from Kumo and Kiri were interested in the kenjutsu information, which was to be expected given the two villages' reputations for kenjutsu practitioners. Gaara of the Desert, not much information on him seeing as he is from a foreign village, but I have here that he has come back from every mission without a scratch, even on a B-rank mission, Kabuto said as he pulled out the second card. The white-haired medic pulled out a third card, Menma, one of the only orphans to win Rookie of the Year aside from Minato Namikaze. Poisons and medical ninjutsu are his specialties. He has completed 1 A-rank mission, 10 C-rank missions, and 67 D-rank missions. Yakumo Karama and Rock Lee are his teammates. Kabuto continued to monologue information, but Menma had lost interest and was observing the crowd. Soon after a minor incident involving some sound genin in a cloud of smoke, several Chunin and Morino Ibiki emerged from a shunshin, quieting the room with his mere presence and barking orders, "Alright all you little brats. I am the examiner of the first section of the Chunin exams. The written portion of the exam is the first part of the exam. Everyone starts with 10 points, and if they are caught cheating, they will lose half their points." Naruto soon found himself between Kuretsuchi and the boy from Kumo. 15 minutes into the test, Naruto could only answer 3 questions, each requiring Jonin-level poison expertise or doctor-level medical knowledge. He looked around the room at all of the Chunin watchers, wondering why they would go to such great lengths to detect cheating when Ibiki could probably tell if anyone was trying to cheat him blindfolded. Anyone caught cheating will lose half their points. He paused. What if they want us to cheat? He discreetly looked around at some people and saw a few genin discreetly cheat, good for genin, but someone like Ibiki could easily spot it. He assumed that their cheating strategies were good enough for Chunin, so the proctors did not point it out. He smirked a little. He closed his eyes and spread his chakra web around him, latching onto Shiori's Tenketsu points and beginning to copy her hand movement on the questions. He was certain that at least one of the guards around him could sense his chakra being used, but he doubted they would call him out on it because it was not obvious. He cast a glance at Lee near the front, sitting next to Hinata, and decided to lend him a hand. Acting as if he was thinking, he bit his thumb and went through some hand seals disguised as cracking his knuckles and summoned 2 small spiders, one for Yakumo and the other for Lee. The spider landed on the desk and spun a small web detailing the answers to some of the shorter questions. Soon after the dramatic 10th question, their sensei Anko led them to the Forest of Death, where she began to scare the poor genins with her antics while explaining the test. Alright, you maggots, the purpose of this test is to survive for 5 days in the forest behind me, Anko said, holding up 2 scrolls. Your goal while surviving the forest is to collect a heaven and an earth scroll before proceeding to the tower in the center of the forest. However, before we begin the test, I'd like everyone to sign these waivers, just in case you die. There were some grumblings, but everyone signed the waiver and received a scroll. When Menma signed the waiver and received a heaven scroll for the team, an idea struck him, and he raised the scroll over his head and shouted, "Hey! Our team possesses a heaven scroll." The genin around him looked at him as if he were an idiot, but the proctors and judges of the test looked at him speculatively. What the genin around him did not realize was that he had protected his team from half the competition. No team would want to waste energy in a potential defeat on a team they knew had the scroll they did not need. As they formed a line at a forest entrance, he smirked slightly as he felt the small chakra of one of his spiders attached to the 2 genin teams whose gates were closest to theirs. As soon as the horn blared, he motioned for their team to follow the chakra signature that his spider was emitting and soon crouched on a tree above a rain village team, where the leader took out an earth scroll. Yakumo did some hand seals and trapped the team in a genjutsu. Naruto took out 2 syringes full of knockout venom and jumped down, landing on 2 of the genins and stabbing them in a major artery, effectively knocking them out, and Lee appeared behind the final member and chopped him in the back of the neck, knocking him out as well. That was easy, Yakumo smirked as they took the earth scroll. Too easy, Naruto remarked. I say we start heading to the central tower before teams get desperate enough to surround it looking for people with both scrolls. They arrived at a small clearing after 3 hours of running, dodging wild animals, and avoiding teams with his chakra web sensing. Naruto looked around. We should rest here for now, we want to be at full strength if we encounter another team. Yes, it would be best if we waited for our flames of youth to replenish before proceeding to the tower, Lee said. We should lay some traps while we rest. Even with your web, we don't know if a team has the ability to counter or negate it, Yakumo said, already understanding youth speak. Menma nodded, his eyes glinting as he remembered one of the traps he wanted to put to the test. I have the perfect thing, he said. Both Lee and Yakumo watched with interest as Naruto took out a black scroll and unwrapped several. Mushrooms? Yakumo looked hesitantly at the mushrooms. If anyone steps on one of these, it will explode, sending a cloud of paralytic poison into the air, forcing the person who stepped on it to inhale it, Naruto chuckled evilly. With these around us, no one will be able to sneak up on us. Kukuku, uncount to Team 9. But in a different dimension every person classified as a jungler flinched simultaneously while a small yordle chuckled evilly as he waited for more people to fall to his shrooms of death. It is now 9 p.m., 3 hours later. Team 9 had entered the tower and opened their scrolls, which turned out to be summoning scrolls for a Chunin to explain the scrolls to them and explain that they would have to stay in the tower for 3 days. The team's time inside the tower moved slowly because there wasn't much to do, and they couldn't train in case they were spied on by an enemy team. After the 5 days were up, the teams that had passed were Kuretsuchi's team, the Kumo team with the lollipop-sucking boy, the Kiri team with the boy with sound dampeners, the Suna team with the red-haired boy, Team 8, Team 11, Kabuto's team, and Team 12. Team 7 had arrived with only a few hours to go for the competition. He was slightly surprised that Shio's team was the last to arrive. Soon after, the proctors summoned all of the teams to the arena in the tower, where they prepared for the next event. From the tower arena, all of the teams were lined up in front of the Hokage and a group of Jonin, and Minato stepped forward to explain the competition's rules. I am glad to see so much potential in one room, Minato said. However, there are far too many competitors for us to make it to the final round. We are conducting a preliminary round to resolve this. Following Minato's speech about how the Chunin exams were a replacement for war, a sickly-looking man stepped forward and said, I will take it over from here, Hokage-sama. My name is Hayate Gecko, and I will be the preliminary round proctor. Each battle will be a duel against a random opponent, according to the rules. The first person to surrender or become unable to fight will be eliminated. He pressed a remote button, and a screen appeared on the wall, reading, the first 2 opponents will be. 2 names flashed across the screen. Yoroi Akado vs. Sasuke Uchiha. Although it appeared as if he was injured from the forest, his injuries could be inhibiting his performance. Although the move at the end was impressive, it appeared as if Sasuke made a swordless copy of the 3 crescent slash that the Gecko family was known to use. Naruto was expecting more from the Uchiha heir. The following match caused many Konoha and Iwa members present to widen their eyes. Kamizuro Suzumaki vs. Shino Aburame. The Aburame and Suzumaki clans had a legendary feud that rivaled the Uchiha Senju feud. They had hated each other since the Aburame killed most of the Suzumaki clan members in the First War. The battle was intense as neither side wanted to lose. Beetles against bees clashed in the air as both genin directed them. However, similarly to the previous war, Shino's beetles were swarming each bee, taking them down due to sheer numbers over the larger bugs. Eventually Shino stood victorious over Kamizuro, the corpses of many dead bees surrounding them. Kankuro vs. Masumi Tsurugi. Masumi used his family skill of turning his arms to rubber and was about to break Kankuro's neck when it was revealed that Kankuro was a puppet who broke many of Masumi's bones in a twisted hug. Ino Yamanaka vs. Sakura Haruno. Despite Sakura's good use of genjutsu, most likely taught by her sensei Kurenai, and Ino's use of her family's jutsu, they were barely genin level with their taijutsu and ninjutsu. Shio Uzumaki Namikaze vs. Temari. As the two girls walked to the arena, Naruto raised an eyebrow at the matchup. Temari was obviously a wind user with her giant fan, but he also knew Shio was one of Konoha's best wind users aside from Asuma Sarutobi. Temari opened her fan and unleashed a great burst of wind at Shio while she unsealed her Nodashi and cut the wall of wind. It appeared that both opponents were testing each other's wind affinity as they repeatedly blasted each other with wind. Naruto noticed that Temari seemed to specialize in the force aspect of wind while Shio seemed to specialize in the cutting aspect of wind. Shio then performed one of her best moves, using a wind cut to force Temari to jump into the air, which is what the Konoha genin was aiming for. Her sword glows green as she jumped into the air at great speeds and slashed at Temari repeatedly with the back of her sword. Shio landed gracefully and sheathed her sword while muttering, "Majestic slash of the rising vortex." The Konoha genin all cheered for their fellow genin and looked forward to the next match. Kin Tsuchi vs. Shikamaru Nara. Shikamaru outwitted the sound genjutsu using genin with his shadow mimic jutsu and proceeded to slam Kin's head against the arena wall, knocking her unconscious rather easily. Samui vs. Kiba Inazaka. Kiba seemed more distracted by Samui's breasts than the actual match, and while Samui displayed brilliant swordplay, she really didn't need it with how Kiba was distracted. Eventually she countered Kiba's fang over fang with her storm release, which Naruto assumed was a mix of water and air to create lightning clouds in the arena, which bombarded Kiba after he mistakenly grabbed Samui's chest. Then there was the next match. Menma vs. Neji Hyuga. Both genin looked at each other, Neji with hatred and Menma with emotionlessness. Neji had hated him since he had stolen his spot as Rookie of the Year, and every time they met, Neji would tell him he was doomed to failure because he was a clanless orphan. Soon after, they took their stances, Neji in the gentle fist style and Menma with his chakra scalpels. When the match began, they both ran at high speeds at each other and began a taijutsu battle, neither putting force behind their strikes and being extremely technical in their strikes. From the stands, Sakura, who had recovered from her match with Ino, turned to his teacher and asked, "Kakashi-sensei, why aren't they attacking each other forcefully?" "Neither of their combat styles require forceful taijutsu," Kakashi said, looking up from his book. Neji employs his family's gentle fist technique, which focuses on striking the internal organs and tenketsu points of the body while injecting chakra into the opponent's body. Menma, on the other hand, employs a unique medic fighting style that revolves around the medical ninjutsu chakra scalpels. Menma can use those scalpels to cut open the body's internal organs with a light touch. Shio shivered as she recalled two arms reaching out of the lake and clutching her ankles. Returning to the arena, Naruto and Neji quickly separate, and Naruto tsks as he notices several finger-sized bruises on his tenketsu spots. Naruto went through some hand seals before thinking, acidic bubbles, breathing out copious amounts of bubbles towards Neji as he had cut the tendons on his arm. Many in the audience snickered at the perceived weakness of the attack until one popped near the wall and the concrete began to dissolve, causing all of the bubbles to streak towards Neji. Neji frowned inwardly. I haven't mastered this, but I have no choice. He began spinning until a chakra dome surrounded him, preventing any of the acid bubbles from hitting him. When he stopped spinning, he quickly had to duck as Naruto swung his arm at where his neck would have been moments before and twisted in mid-duck and struck 4 tenketsu points on Naruto's chest. He frowned a bit as Unbeknownst to Neji, medical chakra was surging into his locked tenketsu on his previously sealed arm, and as Neji charged forward, Naruto quickly dodged the palm thrust and then jabbed with his previously sealed arm, striking Neji near the lungs with the chakra scalpel. As he fell backwards, blood spurted from Neji's mouth. As soon as Menma was declared the winner, he began to heal Neji's wounds. He looked up at the board and saw the next match and became concerned. Rock Lee vs. Gaara. As doctors came forward to collect Neji, Naruto ended his healing hands on him and walked back to the second floor, contemplating the match. According to Kabuto, Gaara is either extremely skilled or extremely lucky to have survived all of those missions unscathed. Naruto was well aware that Lee was superior to him in taijutsu. He was concerned if this guy had a move that could negate Lee's taijutsu. From Lee's perspective, Yosh. Let us have a youthful battle, Lee said as he took his Goken stance in front of the red-haired genin. While Yakumo sighed, some genin looked perplexed by what Lee was saying. Gaara looked at Lee emotionlessly as the cork on his gourd popped out at the Konoha genin at breakneck speed. Let's not be so hasty, Lee said as he caught the cork. Hayate raised his arm, Hajime. Looking between the two genin, Lee vanished in a flash of lightning and reappeared behind Gaara with a dropkick. However, sand blocked the leg before the heel could strike Gaara's head, forcing Lee to jump away before the sand swarmed him. From the audience, sand? Pondered Naruto to himself. The medic wondered if that was a Sabaku magnet release mutation. As Naruto observed Lee's constant use of high-speed movement to dodge and try to hit Gaara, he noticed that Gaara made no move to control the sand. Does it happen automatically? Even the third Kazekage was known to require great chakra control and focus in order to use his iron sand. He watched with interest as Gaara appeared to do the impossible and control his sand in an automatic defense. Anko yelled from beside Naruto, "Oigaki! Take them off." Naruto was shaken from his thoughts. Arena. But sensei, you told me not to take them off unless I'm fighting an enemy shinobi, Lee said as he stepped away from Gaara. What the hell do you think you're doing? Pound his ass, dumbass, said Anko. Some of the people who weren't used to Anko's antics cringed at her language. He nodded and quickly jumped away from Gaara, unclipping his leg and arm bracers and holding them to both sides, wanting to show off a little for the judges. Konkuro commented on the leg bracers. What will that do for him if he takes those off? She would have continued, but Lee dropped the weights with an earth-shattering boom, severely denting the floor. Kakashi deadpanned at the scene and commiserated with Anko. Was that much weight really needed in his training, Anko? It was Guy's idea. I had my other Gaki draw up some chakra weight seals and apply them to his arm and leg bracers, Anko grinned savagely. He's been bulking them up for over a year. Lee grinned menacingly at Gaara, who seemed perplexed by the weight and vanished in an instant, and the automatic sand shield barely arrived in time as Lee's leg hit, easily breaking through the defense and kicking Gaara away. Konkuro appeared surprised that someone had managed to hit Gaara. Gaara stood up shakily, looking at his cheek, which was heavily cracked and flaking as the sand shield around his body mended. Gaara looked back up to see a foot that was too fast to be stopped by his sand and went hurtling backwards, only to be stopped by Lee's other leg and sent him straight at the statue at the back of the room. Naruto took pride in the scene. Guy had originally only wanted Lee to wear leg weights, but Anko insisted on arm weights as well, allowing Lee to increase his speed to mid-Jonin level. Gaara stepped out of the dust that had kicked up from the kick, raised both arms, and sand began to shoot up from the ground in his gourd as he charged at Lee. Lee began to perform some serious acrobatics as he frantically dodged the sea of sand rushing at him and kept trying to get to Gaara. Lee took out his nunchucks and used them as a shield and a weapon against the sand as he spun them around to beat the sand away as he charged towards Gaara. However, there was just too much sand in the arena for Lee to get through, so he retreated to a. Kakashi's eyes widened and he looked at Anko, perplexed, as said Jonin smirked widely. First gate. Gate of opening, open. Lee uncrossed his arms, and power erupted around him. Soon, Lee was hurtling towards Gaara, smashing through sand walls before kicking Gaara in the chin and jumping up behind Lee, doing a spinning flying suplex while shouting, "Primary Lotus." When the smoke cleared from the move, it revealed a broken sand shell that resembled Gaara. Lee panted a little from the backlash of using the first gate, but he was able to barely avoid a wave of sand that came after him as Gaara emerged from a pile of sand looking a little haggard. Lee crossed his arm over his face and concentrated, knowing he had no choice. Anko looked at him seriously as Kakashi revealed his Sharingan eye, wide-eyed as he viewed Lee. "Don't even try to judge me, Kakashi. I allowed Guy to teach him the hidden lotus for one reason: that kid can take it. This kid is the only one who deserves to learn that move." Lee uncrossed his arms as more chakra exploded from him, turning his skin red and causing his eyes to lose their irises. Open the second gate, the gate of healing. Open the third gate, gate of life. Open the fourth gate, gate of pain. With those gates open, it appeared as if there were multiple Lee kicking and punching Gaara around the arena, battering the Suna Genin. Eventually Gaara crashed into the ground, badly hurt as Lee could barely stand from using that technique. Lee looked at Gaara and saw him still conscious, lifting his hand to surely crush the weakened Genin. Flashback. Lee and Naruto were resting after a sparring session in a training field when Naruto said, "You know, Lee, if you face an opponent immune to taijutsu, you need something to fall back on." "But I have my nunchucks, Menma, why would I need something else?" Lee wondered. "There are some opponents who are completely immune to physical damage. You need something that can damage people like that. Here," Naruto said as he handed Lee a pouch containing what appeared to be smoke bombs. "Each one of those is a powerful knockout poison. Use it if you fight an opponent who can stop your taijutsu," Naruto explained as Lee took one of the smoke bombs out and looked at it curiously. Lee nodded thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on the smoke bombs. Flashback concludes. Lee quickly unwrapped one of the smoke bombs and threw the small ball at Gaara just as the sand hit him, causing everything to freeze as the ball exploded on Gaara, allowing the red-haired sand user to inhale the smoke. Lee muttered, "I won." He could barely stand and his muscles were on fire, but he had won against someone who was clearly a natural genius. However, before he could celebrate, his leg and arm were brutally crushed by sand. Everyone looked shocked as they saw Gaara shakily stand up, barely able to stand. "Take a step back." Gaara stared up at the Suna Jonin before the entire room's sand converged on him, reforming his armor and gourd before slowly walking back up to the balcony. Naruto jumped down to Lee, his healing palms already glowing a deep green. He didn't understand how his knockout gas didn't work. The stuff was designed to knock out large animals. Gaara should have been out for at least 3 days. He winced as he examined Lee. There were multiple fractures in his leg and arm. He stood back and let them take Lee away, feeling slightly helpless. The judges took a 30-minute break to repair the arena after the fight between Lee and Gaara. Naruto and Yakumo were unable to visit Lee because he had been taken to Konoha's hospital due to his injuries. The next match appeared on the screen. Yakumo Kurama vs. Hinata Hyuga. With her Byakugan, Hinata could see through most of Yakumo's genjutsu and was more than likely better at taijutsu than the genjutsu specialist. However, as he looked at Yakumo's face, he knew she was determined to win. Yakumo's point of view. Both girls stood across from each other in the arena, Hinata slightly nervous under Yakumo's steely gaze. For a normally docile and happy girl, Yakumo appeared to be ready to kill. Hayate turned to face the two girls and raised his arm, saying, "Hajime." Yakumo flashed through hand seals and Hinata soon saw her family, Kurenai, and her team berating her for being weak and useless. However, Hinata activated her Byakugan and saw through the illusion and ran towards Yakumo to engage her in taijutsu. However, before Hinata could react, the genjutsu user went through 4 hand seals and a wall of earth rose before the black-haired girl. Yakumo was quickly painting a genjutsu painting behind the wall, not caring about quality as she painted a rough scene of the room they were in. As Hinata stood back up, she rushed to the collapsing wall but gasped as everything was reversed. The room was upside down, and as she looked up, she could see the roof but experienced severe vertigo as she tried to keep her footing on the reversed floor. "How do you like my real illusions?" Yakumo chuckled. "Everything is reversed with this genjutsu, left is right is left, and up is down." She drew her tanto and charged at Hinata. Hinata drew a kunai to block the tanto, but a cut appeared on her opposite shoulder, causing her to gasp in pain. Also, every cut appears in the opposite direction. Yukumi grinned evilly. From the audience, Kurenai winced as she saw Hinata attack in the completely wrong direction at Yakumo. She noticed Yakumo painting a picture and figured Hinata was now in an almost unbreakable genjutsu. She wished she hadn't given up on Yakumo that day, but she didn't know Minato could seal her Edo demon. Returning to the arena, Hinata was breathing heavily because she had many small cuts all over her body, and every time she tried to counter Yakumo, she was cut, and her attacks went straight through her. Hinata, however, heard her idol, Shio, encouraging her through the illusion. She had always admired the Uzumaki heiress for her bravery and courage and focused a bit and waited for Yakumo to charge at her. As she got closer, she tried something she had never done before. She quickly spun in a circle while shouting, "Kaiten!" Encircled her, sending Yakumo flying away from her. Hinata exclaimed a little. The Kaiten was a very draining jutsu, and she could only use it 3 more times before passing out from chakra exhaustion. Soon, the battle became who would be knocked out first, as Yakumo attempted futilely to get past the Kaiten and was flung back before both girls were breathing heavily, but eventually, Hinata fell over exhausted but proud of herself for being able to stand up for herself. Hayate turned to the downed girl and exclaimed, "Winner Yakumo Kurama." Naruto's point of view. "You shouldn't be so reckless, you could have injured yourself by charging in like that," Naruto said as he cheered for Yakumo and helped heal some of her injuries from the numerous Kaitens. Yakumo grunted but did not respond as her medic teammate healed her. He took a look at the board and noticed the next match. Kinada Dosu vs. Choji Akamichi. Choji used his partial expansion jutsu to try to crush Dosu, but when Choji crashed into a wall, Dosu used his melody arm to knock the big-boned boy out. The following match piqued his interest. Omoi vs. Kuretsuchi. Despite Omoi's excellent kenjutsu skills, he was no match for Kuretsuchi's earth release and lava release, and eventually surrendered as he was surrounded by puddles of boiling lava. Akatsuchi vs. Gengada Hazuka. The battle featured a wide range of water and earth jutsu, with Gengada seemingly constantly using water bullets to pierce the earth constructs that Akatsuchi created. The battle remained a stalemate until Gengada summoned a medium-sized clam, which spread a mist over the battlefield, creating mirages that Gengada used in conjunction with his water jutsu to defeat Akatsuchi. Chojuro vs. Mito Gecko. From Mito's perspective, Chojuro drew his double-handed fish-shaped sword, while Mito drew her katana, and Hayate looked between the two genin before exclaiming, "Hajime." Chojuro leapt into action, unwrapping his sword to reveal the haramekure and leaping into the air, yelling, "Hammer form." The sword of the seven mists seemed to splash a little before transforming into a massive hammer and crashing down on Mito. Mito appeared calm and collected as she took a stance with her katana. First dance, Sliver Moon, she dashed forward, spinning around in a graceful arc and striking at Chojuro's side. Chojuro, seeing the direction of the strike, yelled, "Shield form." And the haramekure surrounded Chojuro with a shield. Mito's slash barely scratched the surface of the bubble, and she jumped back as Chojuro reverted his sword to a hammer. She sighed slightly before channeling chakra into her sword, doubling its length with a blue glow. From the stands. "Isn't that the chakra practices that the samurai use?" Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow at his sensei. "Yup. What a lot of people don't know is that Hayate's father was a samurai," Anko said while still watching the sword fight. Before they moved to Konoha, he told Hayate everything he knew. He had to have taught it to his daughter. In the ring, she rushed forward, holding her blue broadsword in one hand, and jumped around Chojuro, swinging her broadsword widely, making many cuts along the Sharktooth boy's body. Chojuro twisted his sword, yelling, "Longsword form." When he swung his sword at Mito, it transformed into a massive sword. Mito twisted around and swung her chakra broadsword with great strength while whispering, "Great Moon Slash," and the chakra from her blade sprang forward in a large blast that collided with the longsword form of the haramekure, creating a blast of dust in the air. As the final matchup appeared on the screen, everyone applauded for Mito. Tenten vs. Umi. Tenten stood across from Umi, looking between them. "Hajime." Tenten leapt into the air and began pelting Umi with various throwing weapons. However, before they arrived at Umi, he took out a scroll and went through some hand seals, saying, "Wave style, great surf." A great burst of water appeared from the scroll, forming a wave and barreling towards the bun-headed genin. Tenten managed to jump over the wave, but the arena's ground floor was completely flooded. Umi went over some more hand seals, saying, "Wave style, turbulence." Soon, the once calm flooded waters of the arena were crashing around the ground floor, and Tenten tried to keep her balance with water walking but was unable to do so and fell in the water, where a net covered her and she was held at trident point. Hayate, who had jumped to the balcony to avoid getting wet, took a look around before declaring, "Winner, Umi." Except for Sasuke, all of the winners were soon lined up in front of the Hokage and Hayate, and the proctor had each person reach for a number before they all had one, and when they opened them, they read as follows. 3 Sasuke Uchiha. 1 Menma, 1 Naruto. Shio Uzumaki, 4 points. 2 Kuretsuchi. 5 Dosu Kinada. Umi, 7. 8 Konkuro. Yakumo Kurama, 9 points. Hazuka Gengada, 10. Gaara, 6. Bai, Shino. Alright, so the matches are as follows: Menma vs. Kuretsuchi, Sasuke Uchiha vs. Shio Uzumaki, Dosu Kinada vs. Gaara, Umi vs. Konkuro, and Yakumo Kurama vs. Gengada Kurama. Shino receives a bye into the second round. The matches will be postponed for a month to allow for the arrival of foreign dignitaries. So, Make the most of this month by training and preparing for the third round. We have provided hotel rooms for each foreign genin team and welcome anyone to use our training fields to prepare for the final exam, Minato stated. Congratulations to everyone who made it to the final round. Konoha Hospital. One day after the preliminary examinations, Menma Pav. Menma and the rest of Team 9 had gone to see Lee in the hospital. They just learned the devastating news that Lee might never be a ninja again. Despite his extensive training in medical ninjutsu, Naruto was unable to heal Lee. He knew it was pointless to berate himself for being unable to heal something that doctors with decades of experience could not. But he couldn't stop thinking about how Lee had worked harder than anyone else in Konoha to become strong, only to have it all wiped away by the genin's madness. Gaara would pay, his fist clenched slightly. He walked down the corridors, lost in thought, thinking to himself, if Gaara stole Lee's future away from him, I will make him regret the day he ever gained that sand ability. He was jolted out of his reverie when he noticed his sister conversing with Kakashi. His sister appeared to be pouting slightly as the Junin appeared sheepish. As Kakashi walked away, she noticed him and a look of guilt and surprise crossed her face. Oh. Menma. I didn't see you there, she seemed to be trying to think of the right words to say. Can we talk privately, how about up on the roof? Naruto thought about it and nodded. He didn't have anything else to do, so might as well. Roof of a hospital. I talked with my parents a few days ago. And I realized I was a bit of a brat back at training ground 26. I was under a lot of stress learning I had a big brother. Ha ha ha. She cleared her throat a bit. I wanted to say I'm sorry for attacking you, Naruto. She smiled sheepishly while scratching the back of her head. I am not angry that we fought. It was a good opportunity to test my abilities, Naruto sighed. Yeah. Some of those moves were really cool. The spider was a little creepy, but those chakra scalpels pack a punch. Shio exclaimed. Is she bipolar? He wondered, looking at the still babbling blonde. Shio abruptly stopped babbling and exclaimed, oh. That's right. Ka-san wanted me to invite you to the dinner party this Saturday to celebrate everyone making it to the finals. He wanted to say no. He truly did. But he made the mistake of looking into his sister's puppy dog eyes, and he felt his grip slip. Is this the person I've despised since childhood? He thought as he stared at his former sister's teary-eyed pleading expression. Fine, he sighed deeply, I'll come. Shio cheered loudly before grabbing his hands. Yes. It will be so much fun. Make sure you come at 6 p.m., and wear something nice. Mom did some investigating and found out you like sushi, so she is making that along with ramen, so I will see you then. She ran off quickly, jumping from building to building. Naruto paused for a moment. She investigated me? Konoha streets, Friday afternoon, Naruto's point of view. After speaking with his sister, Naruto was walking down Konoha's main street. He was planning a training schedule for the month ahead. He was well aware that he needed an ace for the finals. His acid release was not a surprise. He was confident that the majority of the competition would try to counter it. He didn't show any of his hidden weapons during the test, but he was confident they'd suspect he had something planned. He considered his opponent Kuretsuchi and what he knew about her. He discovered she is the Tsuchikage's granddaughter after doing some research. She was also one of only a few people in over a century to combine two elements that did not share a bloodline. The lava release was without a doubt one of the most potent offensive styles he had ever seen. Even if you are not directly hit by the lava, you must be careful where you dodge so that you do not step in it. He couldn't possibly use his acid release against her. In the presence of lava, his toxic substances? He would murder all of the onlookers. To win the match, he would have to rely on his tricks and medical skills. Anko had told him that for the finals, she would concentrate on Yakumo. He didn't blame her. Gengata was a descendant of the second Mizukage and was likely familiar with many of his tricks. He doubted Arachne could help him because the rest of her techniques would take him years to master. He entered his apartment and went straight to the hidden wall where he keeps the majority of his weapons, searching through them. He armed himself with an arm crossbow, a back crossbow, a blowpipe, a satchel full of poison supplies, poisoned claws, and a slew of poisoned senbon needles. He left the apartment in search of a suitable training ground. Training Area 18. The obstacle courses at Training Ground 18 are well known. It has everything from bear traps to swinging logs. Naruto was practicing his evasion because he knew how important it would be to have quick reaction time against the lava user. The trick will be to get her out of there as soon as possible. The more lava there is on the ground, the longer the match lasts. He jumped over a log, shot an arrow at the rope, and flipped over a couple of blunted kunai before landing on a wooden ledge and continuing to traverse the obstacle course. He didn't remember what Shio told him earlier until around 5 p.m., when he left the training ground and returned his weapons to his apartment. He scratched the back of his head as he looked through his closet and saw nothing but training clothes and casual clothes. He had never been to a nice party before as an orphan, so he had no idea what to wear. He decided to go shopping for an outfit tomorrow after eating rice with roe on top and vegetables. Naruto's POV. Next evening, Namikaze Estate. Naruto looked up at the house he had called home for so many years. It felt strange returning for such a trivial reason. He had always imagined himself returning to this house to burn it down, rather than to attend a party. He was dressed in a black suit with a wine-colored button-up shirt underneath and no tie. He let out a sigh and knocked on the door. "You came. I am so excited for the party. We are hosting it in the back garden," Shio said as he opened the door and dragged him inside. Shio wore a formal kimono but managed to make it appear casual as she interacted with some of the guests. Shikamaru was with his parents, talking to Choji and Ino. Shino and her parents were conversing with Yakumo. When he looked up, he saw Kushina smiling at him, saying, "Menma. I am glad you arrived. I saw your match and was very impressed." He noticed she followed through on her promise to call him Menma. He remembered their conversation after the preliminary round. Flashback. Naruto was walking away from the hospital when he noticed Kushina waving at him, and he sighed slightly as she approached. "I am proud of you for winning, Naruto, and I was hoping to see where you live so I could come over sometime," she beams at him. Naruto paused for a moment before nodding and leading the way to his apartment. If it weren't for the plants, his apartment would be considered Spartan. The apartment felt more like a greenhouse than a living space. There were plants on the windowsills, on the table, hanging from the ceiling, and in pots strewn about the room. The apartment had only a bed, a table with 2 chairs, and a couch in the living room facing a television. They quickly got into a discussion about light topics like the weather, the Chunin exam, and other such things. Naruto was surprised at how quickly he grew accustomed to Kushina's presence. She was a genuine likable person with an aura that made everyone around her happy. He lamented the fact that he had never had the opportunity to do so when he was younger. However, they soon moved on to more serious topics as Kushina took a deep breath and asked the most pressing question on her mind: "Have you considered reclaiming the Namikaze Uzumaki name?" Naruto considered the offer while looking down at his hands. It was enticing, very enticing. With 2 clan names, he could gain many advantages in the village as well as greater recognition in other nations. He could get better jobs in Konoha and even have a better chance of becoming Hokage if he wanted to. However, when he remembered Inari's words, "I gave you the only gift I could in my weakened state, anonymity," he despised the fox even more than he despised his parents. But he was correct in that his actions likely saved him from a life of constantly looking over his shoulder for his parents' enemies. I really want to have a family again. But I have worked so hard as Menma, and joining the Uzumaki family again would attract too much attention. A son of Minato Namikaze who looks nothing like either of you suddenly being revealed. I just don't want to deal with that, he said, shaking his head. Kushina was sad, but she seemed to understand. If you can you keep referring to me as Menma in public? I have grown attached to the name. Naruto continued. Even if you aren't a part of our family anymore, you will always be my son, and I will love you no matter how much you change, Kushina said as she stood up to leave. Naruto felt his eyes moisten slightly and hugged her back, a full smile on his face. Flashback concludes. There were platters of sushi and large bowls of ramen for the guests, as well as drinks. Kiba had to be restrained from drinking alcohol by Shino, and everyone gaped at Hinata because of the amount of ramen she could eat. Naruto had fun talking to Mito and Shio. Unbeknownst to everyone at the party, two figures were discussing plans on the top of a shadowy rooftop. Hayate would have died in another dimension, but he was given the day off to celebrate his daughter's victory in the preliminary races. 3 days later. Naruto had been training in evasion and water ninjutsu and thought he deserved a relaxing soak in the hot springs. However, as he was relaxing, he heard an annoying giggling sound coming from the fence. He looked over and saw a large white-haired man that he recognized from the barbershop, Jiraiya of the Sannin. He had heard rumors of his perversity but did not realize it was this bad. From the other side of the fence, Anko was talking with Kurenai when she noticed the missed message. She smirked a little before looking at her fellow kunoichi and they all nodded. Soon, all of the civilians in the bath began to splash each other happily as they snuck around to the men's side of the bath. Soon, screams of agony and pain were heard throughout the street as towel-clad kunoichi beat the Sannin within an inch of his. I hope you learned your lesson from this, but knowing your track record, I doubt it. The downed man appeared to miraculously heal and summoned a large frog and kabuki music as he hopped on one leg. I am the man known throughout the world. The man feared by men and loved by women. I am the Gamma Sage. Jiraiya. All he could do was turn around and leave, deadpanning at the ridiculous man. Jiraiya planted his face behind him and yelled, "Don't just leave." Naruto scowled. What do you want, perverted old man? 3 arrows appeared to pierce Jiraiya, each bearing the words perverted old man. Jiraiya sighed heavily as he remembered his conversation with Minato the day before. Flashback. Jiraiya's point of view. You have a son? Exclaimed Jiraiya, staring at his student in disbelief. Yes, it appeared that someone put a genjutsu on Kushina and that would force us to gradually abandon him, Minato grimaced, rubbing his brow. Jiraiya, still stunned, asked, Can I meet him? If he is your son, he would be my godson. Minato nodded. His name is Menma, and he registered himself as an orphan last year, graduating as Rookie of the Year. I remember that. I got a notice saying for the first time since my student and orphan gained the title of Rookie of the Year. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Minato? Jiraiya paused. Minato gave a sad smile. I just wish I could have helped him get there. Could you look after him for a month and possibly teach him some of your skills? Jiraiya's face lit up. Sure, I'll teach the Gaki a few tricks, and maybe he'll sign the Toad contract. He can't sign the Toad contract because he signed the Spider contract, Minato grumbled. Jiraiya sighed. That's too bad, and there's no way he'll sign both because of the clan he signed with. Why is that? Minato wondered. The spiders and the toads have been rivals for centuries. They are natural enemies in the wild, and that reflects on their clans. Toads, you know, are known for eating spiders. Minato winced slightly but nodded. Please just keep an eye out for him. There have been rumors of Sans discontent with us, and I want to make sure this exam goes smoothly with all of the other cages arriving. Flashback concludes. Naruto Pav. Jiraiya leaned in slightly and quietly said, "Your father wanted me to check up on your training. See if you needed any help." He would have helped you himself, but he is very busy with the Chunin exam preparations. I've been fine training on my own, but can I ask you a few questions about hypothetical situations? Naruto nodded. Jiraiya nodded, and they began strategizing how to beat Kuratsuchi in the finals. After an hour of deliberation, Jiraiya stood up and said, "Why don't we spar, kid, so I can see how good you are?" Naruto nodded and led the way to Training Ground 9. Training Area 9. Naruto and Jiraiya fought for over 30 minutes before Naruto poisoned his hand and attempted to punch Jiraiya while shouting, "Acid-spiked punch." Jiraiya yelled, "Hari Jizo!" And his hair grew into a shield around him, deflecting the attack. When Naruto saw that move, he called an end to the training spar. "Jiraiya-san, what was that move?" Jiraiya appeared perplexed. Of all the moves he demonstrated, his personal hair jutsu was the one he concentrated on? "That was my personal brand of jutsu. I attack and defend with my hair. No one ever expects the hair to be used as a weapon." Naruto considered the implications of such a move. It could help him overcome his weakness of his webs being intangible to touch. He could mimic the spider's best moves if he could weave his hair into a web around the battlefield and direct it with chakra. "Can you teach me how to do that?" "Are you sure? By the time you get it down, it'll probably be time for the finals," Jiraiya inquired. "Yes, Jiraiya-sensei." Naruto nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. "Sensei, eh? I like the sound of that," Jiraiya laughed. Naruto's apartment, finals day, Naruto Pav. Naruto armed his wrist crossbow and smirked as his hair unwove from its web-like position around his apartment. It was time to show the world what he was capable of.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.